Welcome back. If you're paying attention to Texas politics these days, you've probably seen the cover of the latest Texas Monthly. Some of the rising stars of the state's Democratic Party and talk of Texas maybe turning blue someday. This week I spoke with the publication's Brian Sweeney.
We've gotten some feedback for sure, and as you say, maybe someday is the key question here with Texas turning blue. Yes, we've heard from readers of both sides, some who are very delighted to see some new faces on the cover who maybe represent a new era of Democratic politics in Texas, and other people who have politely said, please cancel our subscription, we're not interested in that. But that's the way that it goes with most of our issues. This is an interesting story in the sense that I think it's trying to tap into all of these different elements that have been happening. We've had Battleground Texas arrive in the state and try to pump money and resources into the party. We've had obviously Wendy Davis's filibuster of the abortion bill, and so all of these events swirling together to ask the question, do Democrats have a chance? And I think that this is an article that looks at it in a very serious way, in a way that takes in the historical perspective of the Democratic Party, but also in a very skeptical way. If something like this is going to happen, it is a long uphill battle for that party.
Yeah, if you haven't seen the article, I mean, it's one of the better political articles, no matter which party you're in. Who's the author?
So Robert Draper, who is a longtime Texas Monthly writer. When I started at the magazine in the mid-90s, he was one of our full-time staff writers. He now does a lot of work for New York Times Sunday Magazine, but continues to write for us. We love it when he's in these pages. He's somebody who understands Texas politics as well as anybody. And one of the things that we really liked about having him involved is that he's based in Washington, D.C. He was also able to give us that perspective. Keep in mind that Battleground Texas, as it comes here, is really part of Obama's field operation. So he was able to have a foot in both worlds and sort of get interviews as to what is the D.C. component to this thing, the interest of the National Democratic Party in state politics here, but also to be on the ground with folks like the Castro brothers, Senator Davis, but also key Republicans, and talking to them about what do they think. There are some great points in here by Steve Ministeri, who's the chair of the State Republican Party, saying that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. The fact that they are here is actually exciting to us because it opens up resources for us, and it gives us even greater reasons to try to connect with Hispanic voters, which is one of his big pushes. I think in the same way that the Democratic Party is trying to change, the Republican Party also knows, because of these coming demographic changes, it also has to make adjustments to try to capture that voter bloc.
So you mentioned the Democratic Party, and I know that there hasn't been too much talk specifically about who's going to run for which statewide race. I think we had the former El Paso mayor,
John Cook, correct?
Yes,
that's right.
Are people kind of waiting to see where people fall? I know Wendy Davis, she has really become kind of a rising star in the Democratic Party since her abortion filibuster.
I think that's right. I mean, everybody has an opinion, and some people have two opinions, and so everybody that you talk to right now seems to have pretty plausible theories for who should run for what and why, and it runs the gamut. You have some people who are saying that of all of these emerging Democrats, none are quite ready to emerge in 2014, and maybe they ought to play it very, very, very cautiously as to who runs. And then there are other people who are making cases for running a full slate. U.S. Senate, which is a race that hasn't really been talked about, but certainly governor, lieutenant governor, and on down the line. I had a very interesting conversation last week with former San Antonio Mayor Henry Cisneros, and I was very interested to get his take on these things. Obviously, he's a supporter of the Castros. Julian is the mayor of San Antonio now, and he was saying that he thought that Julian would make an ideal candidate for governor in 2014, with perhaps Wendy Davis running for that second slot in lieutenant governor. We shall see. All of that said, two things that the Democrats would have to see. One, can they take the moment from filibuster night and turn it into a movement, which is to say, can that energy be directed in a sustained way as opposed to something that just sort of disappears? And two, what can they do to make 2014 move the party forward, which is to say, I think that you could declare victory by not winning any of the statewide races, but what you have to see is a bigger share of the electorate, larger turnout, and races that instead of looking at 2040, things that are 55-45 perhaps. I think 2014 is the year where the Democrats are going to try to position themselves in a way to show gains in later statewide elections.
You talk about the abortion filibuster, and the one from the first special session kind of pushed us into this second special session. You know, they've been at the Capitol for almost 200 days now.
It seems like it will never end, right? I mean, that old line about meeting 140 days every 2 years, well, it seems like that's been completely obliterated. Here we are with less than a week to go in the second special session. Certainly the distance right now that exists exists on transportation funding. Looks like we may be back for a third special session, this effectively ruining everybody's vacation plans, both politicians, staffers, and journalists alike. We'll see how all of that shakes out. I mean, these things are going to end up on the November ballot if they make it. Voters are already going to be looking at something related to water infrastructure on the November ballot, and then coming hot on the heels of that will be the March primary. So there's a lot of excitement going on, but also a lot of questions.
Governor Perry's office has told us that, he wants transportation done. Right. If they don't get it done, I guess in the next few days, because Tuesday's the last day, they will absolutely be back here for a third special session.
I think today is a key day. Both chambers are back in. We'll begin to see if the conference committee can iron out the differences between the House side and the Senate side related to transportation funding. One of the big issues right now has been if they're going to divert money from the rainy day fund, which, as you remember going back to the beginning of the session, the rainy day fund has been a hot potato in terms of how it's going to be used. One of the problems right now is that the House does not want a floor, which is to say if the rainy day fund dips below a certain amount, they still want that funding to continue. The Senate says, no way. We're going to put a hard cap, $6 billion, on how low the rainy day fund can go. If it goes below that, we're going to stop those payments. And that's right now where the big disagreement is. My question would be, if this is not able to get solved, do we really see movement once we come back on Wednesday for a third special session? And so we'll see. I think what happens over the next 48 hours will be key to see if they're able to resolve this problem or not.
Well, less than a week to go in the special session, but our coverage doesn't stop there. The conversation continues online on the legislative section of KXAN.com. We have a new feature with in-depth profiles of some of the top office holders in the state. You can also check out our guide to the latest legislative process and my blog from the Capitol. It's all on the legislative section of KXAN.com. You can email me your thoughts and questions at josh.hinkle@KXAN.com. You can also find me on Twitter @HinkleJ. Thanks for joining us for In Session In Depth. Have a great morning.